Hi, it's Dwyer. It's Monday, March 20th, 2023. GamblersAdvisory.com, a free site. BettingAngle.us, a free site. Let's talk boxing, but first remember, the opinion you should follow should be your own. Just consider this video to be a second opinion from a complete stranger online. Now, let's talk about a couple of boxing stories. Then let's talk about Jarrell Miller's win over Lucas Browne in the heavyweight division and what that means. I see that boxing is a real competitive sport, right? Fighters are competitive, not just in the ring, but out of the ring, right? They think that boxing fans like you and me have very short memories. So you have guys now taking shots on Saul Alvarez, right? David Benavidez' father, obviously he wants his son to fight Canelo, is talking about how Canelo's not taking the sport seriously. Everyone's upset over Canelo's next opponent, John Ryder. Floyd Mayweather has made similar comments where he's saying, hey, who's Canelo fighting? How could we take Canelo seriously when he's fighting this level of opposition? Let me just be clear here. Canelo owes me nothing, right? This is a guy, let's remember, before he gets to 168, this is a guy who fought Miguel Cotto. He fought Shane Mosley. He fought Floyd Mayweather. I'm not saying he beat all these guys, but he's in the ring against them. At middleweight, you remember, we all thought that Danny Jacobs was tough, that Danny Jacobs was going to be the ultimate litmus test. Canelo fought and beat Danny Jacobs. You remember James Kirkland, a guy who was rough and tumble. Canelo fought him, traded punches with him, didn't run from him, won that fight by stoppage. Let's talk about Canelo at 168. There were four guys with titles. Four guys with titles when Canelo gets to 168. Folks, he beats all four guys. Rocky Fielding, Callum Smith, Caleb Plant, Billy Joe Saunders, right? For good measure. Canelo fights two of the guys at light heavyweight, two champions. Kovalev, he stops him, right? Stops him. Just like he stopped Billy Joe Saunders, just like he stopped Caleb Plant, just like he stopped Rocky Fielding. In other words, Canelo's not a judge's favorite who's just getting by on, personality and questionable scoring. No, Canelo's stopping guys. Only Callum Smith, and we all know Callum Smith lost that fight, was able to go the distance with Canelo in these 168 championship fights. Well, just to understand, Canelo goes up to light heavyweight. Canelo beats Kovalev. Canelo loses to Bivol, right? Unbeaten champion today at 175, right? So then Canelo, of course, has unfinished business with Golovkin, and Canelo beats him, right, folks? All Canelo has to do is to find a hook on a wall and hang up his gloves, wait the required period of time, whatever the protocol is, and he's in the Boxing Hall of Fame, right? He's had a Hall of Fame career. When I think of guys who are avoiding people, right, like Tyson Fury seems to be today, right? When I think of the avoiding guys, I don't think of Canelo, right? So if Canelo, after a great career, wants to take a breather, wants to prioritize fighting in front of a home crowd, right? Fighting in front of his fans, over fighting the next champion at 168 or 175, right? If Canelo wants to exhale a little bit, I got no problem with that. Right? This is a guy, quite frankly, who doesn't owe the sport anything, certainly doesn't owe me anything. He's already fought more champions than what, 99% of the sport? So I tip my hat to Canelo. The guys criticizing Canelo, look, I understand competition and in boxing, trash talk is all part of the game. Let's just consider it that, right? I mean, Canelo, folks, he's fought in several weight classes. He's fought champions in several weight classes. Really, that's what you hope for from great fighters. He's delivered. Now, let's talk about this Lucas Browne Jarrell Miller fight. Now, I would be off base if I didn't mention the fact that both Lucas Browne and Jarrell Miller have failed multiple drug tests in the past. Right now, the issue of PEDs is taboo, right? I'm just here to tell you that it's not just boxing. If you look closely at sports, if you follow these guys, if you look at how they looked in their 20s, then you look at how they looked in their 30s, I'm just telling you, it's my belief that PEDs are all over the place in boxing, right? As well as some other sports, right? But in boxing, they're all over the place. We can put a happy face on it. We can pretend that, some guy ate too many eggs. Isn't that the Conor Benn story we're hearing now? He ate too many eggs, and somehow if you eat too many eggs, you could fail a PED test, right? I'll tell you, some of the times I've left McDonald's, I'd have no shot of passing a PED test if that's true, right? Hold on one second. I'm in a video, babe. All right. Well, let's just talk about the fight, too. Lucas Browne, older, right? Jarrell Miller, folks, you realize after he blew the Anthony Joshua fight, right? Because he was on PEDs. After that, he was busted later for using PEDs, right? Let me also say, too, and this is something we all have to look at. The level of drug testing really depends on the venue. So what people need to do is they need to think about where a fight is being held, right? Especially when it involves guys who have failed drug tests. Also, understand too, failing a drug test is like drinking and driving. If you're busted drinking and driving, you and I know that's not the first time you've had a few drinks before you got behind the wheel, right? I know everyone has some story. Hey, I was at a friend's birthday. They gave me a second beer. I didn't order. I had the beer. Then I got pinched as I was backing out the parking lot. Come on, you and I know many of those stories are bogus, right? You get caught drinking and driving when that's a habit you have, right? When you've gotten by 3 or 4 times where you've been behind the wheel drinking and driving, and then it's that 5th time where, oh, maybe I'll get over here. Oh, damn it, the cop saw me and stuff like that. Well, with PED use, I'm just telling you, guys don't just suddenly have female fertility drugs in their system, right? It takes effort to have a nutritional consultant, to have people talking to you about clearance times, right? To learn about VADA requirements and to figure out how you might be able to try to get through VADA requirements. I'm just telling you that folks have the excuses thought out before they get busted. Now, whoever is on the drugs that Conor Benn got busted for can say, oh, you know what? I had a lot of eggs, right? I was at McDonald's. And as I walked out of McDonald's, they came up to me with a testing sample, and that's the only time I would have failed that test. Right? Well, I don't buy it. I think guys are looking for shortcuts. I think the money in boxing is huge. I think everyone reaches their mid to late 30s and they want that extra paycheck, right? They realize, wow, my choices are a big boxing purse from some venue that's a little lackadaisical in terms of drug testing protocols, right? Or getting minimum wage or perhaps unemployment, right? A lot of guys are going to take the boxing purse. Well, just understand, the guy who hopped in the ring, Manuel Charr, after the fight, to call out Jarrell Miller, appropriately enough, himself had failed a drug test. Multiple anabolic steroids were found in his system, right? So when I'm talking about PEDs being rampant in boxing, if you look at the Lucas Browne Jarrell Miller fight, not only were both guys in the fight alums of failing drug tests, but the guy who hopped in the ring had failed at least one PED test himself. Now, the Lucas Browne Jarrell Miller fight is a bit shocking. You know, I've seen big fighters in boxing before. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a guy hop in the ring weighing over 330 pounds, which is what Jarrell Miller weighed. And understand, he's active. He's not 330 and sluggish. No, he's 330 and folks, he's throwing a lot of punches. He's trading. He's hunting you down. He backs up Lucas Browne here. He's the fighter with the higher volume at 330 pounds. And when you look at his body, it doesn't look like Buster Mathis's body looked in the 1960s, right? He's not carrying a lot of flab. This isn't Butterbean, right? This is a guy who, you know, I'm not saying he's cut, but all I'm saying is if you asked me to come up with his weight, I'd say, 270, right? I'd be off by 60 pounds. Well, don't get too carried away by the winner of this Lucas Browne Jarrell Miller fight, because it becomes a shootout, right? It's a shootout. And understand, both guys leave defense someplace else, right? Both guys are just hooking each other, just going at it, right? The idea was that both guys have power. All it would take is to be right once to win this fight, right? Lucas Browne knocked out Junior Fa, winging big shots in that fight, right? And so here you have two heavyweights. They're cagey, they're experienced. Lucas Browne has a win over Hall of Famer James Toney, right? They're cagey, they're experienced. And folks, by the time you get to the middle of this fight, they're winging shots. Now, if they were to fight a Tyson Fury, a guy who actually has boxing skills, who's not going to get lured into some shootout at OK Corral, right? Where it's all hooks and guys are just throwing shots and guys are taking shots, right? Both of these guys take punishment in the fight, right? If instead a boxing match breaks out, where Tyson Fury knows you're going to be front foot heavy, you're going to be walking into his shots, and he can tame you like a lion tamer would, right? By sticking a jab in your face and, you know, making you pay. Also, because of the lack of defense, right? Neither Jarrell Miller nor Lucas Browne is defensively blessed. Lucas Browne used to have great legs. That's a thing of the past, right? Here, Lucas Browne's just standing there swinging, right? I believe a Tyson Fury, I believe a Luis Ortiz, and I know Ortiz has a bit of a chin problem, but Ortiz actually has some defense in the pocket, more defense than these guys. I believe a guy like that could take these guys out, right? Just understand, though, that both of these guys, because it's feast or famine, right? Because Lucas Browne is either losing like this or he's beating a prospect like Junior Farr by stoppage. Because these guys have big punches and are risk takers, their fights are exciting. A promoter hoping to give the fans an exciting fight, who thinks he has a fighter who can take advantage of these guys' defensive lapses, right, would probably want to have these guys on the boxing card if these guys could get insurance, right? That's a big question, because understand, insurance is involved when you're putting on a fight, especially when there is a chance that a guy might, in Jarrell Miller's case, for at least a third time, fail a PED test, right? If you feel there's a possibility the fight might be called off, you need insurance. If you can get insurance for these guys, these are guys who are going to be very popular, right? But I don't think a Lucas Browne or a Jarrell Miller can beat a Philly Bergovic, right? I think a guy like Martin Bakole, who is accurate, right? He's extremely accurate, and he can match these guys in volume. I think a guy like Martin Bakole has better defense than these guys, right? And so I'll just say, keep an eye on both Lucas Browne and Jarrell Miller, more for the entertainment value. The fact that they'll force opponents to fight them, right? Because they're not worried about defense. They're willing to take some shots, right? You need to keep an eye on both of these guys because you do have young guys in the heavyweight division, right? You do have guys who need to be pushed in the heavyweight division. Tony Yoka would have a hard time against both of these guys, right? Because these guys would force Tony Yoka to fight them, right? Just pay attention to both of these guys. I think Zhang Zhili, I think Joe Joyce, both of those guys would beat these guys. I think Luis Ortiz would beat these guys. I think they're made to order for Andy Ruiz because in the pocket, folks, Andy Ruiz has the fastest hands in the heavyweight division and is more organized than these guys, right? I mean, these guys are just winging shots. Let me close with this. There's a great interview on Boxing Social, right, of Evander Holyfield, right, a great fighter who fought other great fighters. So, they asked Evander, who's the guy who hit you the hardest? And it's a loaded question because Evander, of course, fought Mike Tyson multiple times. He fought Lennox Lewis multiple times. He fought Riddick Bowe multiple times. Right? His answer doesn't surprise me. He said the guy who hit him the hardest was George Foreman. And I need for people to understand, he fought older George Foreman. This is George Foreman on his comeback after several years out of the ring. Right? People need to understand, you know, boxing is a sport that has some gifted punchers, right? We're in a puncher's era. Deontay Wilder, my goodness, he can knock out an opponent who's fully conscious, who looks good, who's alert, right? Dominic Brazil, for example, right, looks alert. And then one punch later is unconscious, right? Anthony Joshua, that's power in both hands. right? AJ, you know, I mentioned Zhang Zhili. Folks, Zhang Zhili is interesting because it doesn't even look like he's hitting you that hard. He looks like he just leans a shoulder down and gets the punch off, right? Doesn't even seem that fast a punch. But yet I've seen guys get hit. Don't judge the punch by the way it looks when the guy throws it. Judge the punch by the way the opponent looks when he's hit by it. Right? Geely's one of the most powerful men in the sport pound for pound. Right? This is like Inoue at the heavyweight division, where the guy doesn't look like he's throwing it that hard, doesn't look like he has much of a windup. The punch doesn't go that far. The other guy is hit by a car. Right? That Inoue Danilo Denier rematch. Mike, I mean, Denier's corner had to tell him, hey, answer the ref, right? Because Denier got knocked down and did not realize it. That's how hard Inoue hits. Well, just to understand, George Foreman was one of the best punchers I ever saw. If you want to see a fight between two very hard punchers, guys who believed in their power, look at George Foreman against Ron Lyle from the 1970s. Right? Now, understand, there were a lot of guys in the 70s who, could hit hard. There are very few who hit as hard as Foreman. Right? I mean, Ernie Shavers. Right? In a decade with guys like Ken Norton and some other guys, Ernie Shavers is probably the only other heavyweight who you're watching a fight, he touches you once, and it's over. Right? So Evander Holyfield went the distance with George Foreman, won the fight. Of course, Evander's facial expression hardly changed. Never get fooled by that. Understand, during the fight, Holyfield's getting hit with shots. Holyfield at one point goes over to his corner and says, did he knock my teeth out? That's how hard he was getting hit. And this is a guy who was in with Tyson and Lennox Lewis, right? So give BoxingSocial.com a look. The interview is Evander Holyfield. Folks, he fought a lot of guys. Understand, too, Holyfield has a history before he gets to the heavyweight division, right? He's fighting some tough guys at cruiser, right? He knows who the hardest puncher was he faced, and it was Big George Foreman. One of the reasons I'm mentioning this is I get the feeling Foreman is underrated, and people just need to realize that there was a time where we all knew Foreman was going to destroy Ali. I mean, people were seriously worried about Ali's health because, understand, Foreman had destroyed Joe Frazier, a very feared heavyweight champion. Then he destroyed Kenny Norton. Look at that fight. Kenny's destroyed neither Frazier nor Norton in those two fights, made it to the third round, right? That's how hard Foreman hit, right? There are very few guys where you say, hey, he's not just a hard puncher. No, this guy is one of the hardest punchers I've ever seen. In a way, for his weight class, is one of the hardest punchers I've ever seen, right? Ditto George Foreman at heavyweight. Anyway, that's how I see it. Let me hear from you. I hope you leave your comments in the comment section of this video. Let me say this too. When you see an older guy and he has less body fat than he did when he was, let's say, 31, 32 years old, right? When you're looking at his face and his neck and you can see the veins, and you notice there's hardly any body fat. and the guy looks like, he's a bodybuilder, right? I need for people to, understand that what that means is for the first half of the fight, if you suspect the fighter is juicing, for the first half of the fight, the guy's going to be superhuman, right? What I've noticed with juicers, though, is while juicing in your 20s doesn't impact your stamina, when you add on the muscles and you lose all the body fat and you're in your mid 30s, there's a wall many juicers hit, right? Where you'll suddenly notice that the juicer who looked great in round 6 is completely out of gas in round 7, right? I mean, completely out of gas. Let's also talk about something else too. And I'm not going to name names here, right? We all have our own private set of notes. We all kind of have a sense of who might be juicing or who's not. HGH, which was the rage in baseball for a while. Do some research on it. You're going to notice that HGH leaves fighters with pronounced jawbones. Not all the time, but some of the time, right? And so if you are on YouTube looking at films, go back a few years and look at the guy when he was younger, right? If the guy doesn't have some oversized jawbone then, and he has an oversized jawbone now, that should raise red flags for you, right? That should tell you, okay, something's not quite right. As I've said, in your 20s, steroids can make you bulletproof, right? In your 30s, your body starts to fight back. At least that's what I think. Let us know what you think in the comment section of this YouTube video, and let's all protect ourselves. I've only named guys here who actually failed drug tests, right? I'm not accusing anyone of juicing. I can say here, Lucas Browne failed drug tests, couple drug tests at least. Jarrell Miller failed a couple drug tests at least, right? That's at least 4 failed drug tests between the guys who actually had the fight. Manuel Char was busted once with 2 anabolic steroids in his system. Right now, I can say that because there are drug test results. Right? Just understand, we live in a litigious world. People sue others at the drop of a hat. Don't make a statement in the comment section that some fighter who hasn't failed a drug test is juicing. Right? Let's be a little bit wiser than that. Right? If someone has failed a drug test, go ahead and mention them. It could even be clenbuterol. Right? You can go ahead and mention that. But let's not smear or defame any of these fighters, because I got to tell you, there's a group of fighters in the sport I'm convinced are clean. Right? I believe Deontay Wilder is clean. I just think Wilder is a gifted puncher. Right? George Foreman, who I mentioned earlier, he's a guy who would go out and chop wood. I'm not kidding. Literally, get an axe and go out and start chopping wood to prepare for fights. Right? Rather than just be in the weight room, George Foreman was out actually doing yard work, carrying logs and stuff like that to get ready for fights. You have guys who are country strong. And to me, it's a shame. When people start talking about steroids, I don't want to make the mistake of publicly saying someone's using steroids who's just country strong or who's just a naturally born big hitter. I look forward to your comments. Thanks for stopping by.